to have a super sharp, like freshly sharpened knife on a Saturday is awesome, because that's normally the day of the week when your knife is the
Yeah,
worst, right? Because it's like it's like your last
yeah,
day of your week.
absolutely. I've sharpened
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
40,000 knives. It was really hard to recover from that. A lot of people thought we were
Hmm.
making
Hmm.
garbage product. We replaced a lot. I'd say more than half of the stuff we make are all custom. You go to
Hmm.
eat these
Hmm.
meals and you could spend a ton of money on it. And it's sometimes I don't really like taste the passion in it.
What's up, folks? Welcome to episode 55 of the Emulsion Podcast. My name is Justin Khanna, and this episode has been, I like to say, years in the making. I had the incredible opportunity to interview Galen Garretson of Town Cutler fame. I'm reading this off their website. Quote, Town Cutler is a multifaceted company dedicated to professional cutlery and handmade culinary goods, being makers, service providers, and retailers of all things cutlery. Founded in San Francisco in 2011 by former chef Galen Garretson, Town Cutler is a destination for high-quality knives and a hub for professionals and home cooks to share in their passion for cutlery and cooking. At their San Francisco and Chicago locations, they offer a curated selection of exceptional cutlery and culinary goods from around the world. They also provide expert knife sharpening, restoration services, as well as their in-house line of custom-made knives and waxed canvas and leather culinary bags and scabbards. End quote. Back in 2013, way back in the day, when I moved to the Bay Area in California, I would drive to San Francisco and visit this man's shop and just drool over the knives and chat with him about custom tools. But there was no Justin Khanna brand like you see today. I was a line cook. I was at the French Laundry, and I bought a couple of custom sheaths from him. I bought some silver spoons just to use while I was on the line. During my station time, I actually got one of his first edition palette knives way back in the day. It seems like I cannot say enough good things about Galen, and hopefully this interview shows you why. Before we get into the show, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, this is an entirely audience-funded publication. If you want a shout-out here on the show, I'm going to be giving new patrons a shout-out here on the show for being awesome and being supportive. Just to make sure that no one's left out, I'm going to start with the current supporters. So Patrick, Paulina, Alberto, Ben, Jack, Lorraine, Katie, Connor, Kai, Amanda, Tomas, and Tomas. It's Thomas. And more than anybody else, the one and only Joshua Burridge from Australia, the boss man on the highest level on my Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support. That's everybody that's supporting right now. Going forward, I'm going to shout out new supporters from week to week. That starts as little as $1 a month. So if you're interested, I would really appreciate it. That is patreon.com/Justin Khanna. Thank you for making interviews like this possible. Let's jump right into it.
Maybe a quick rundown of what's happening and exciting
Yeah,
for you right now.
definitely. I rarely get out to restaurants or know what's going on too much other than just reading what's online or what some of my staff tells me because they go out and eat out a lot more than I do. So yeah, I'm mostly engaged with knife making and other makers, which is a pretty exciting world right now because about 7 years ago there was hardly any American knife makers. There was probably like 3 or 4 people that I found that were doing it full time. A lot of other people were making like Bowie knives and folding knives and maybe made some culinary stuff here and there, but now the culinary knife scene is just booming. There's tons of people that are making knives.
I've certainly followed a ton of those guys on Instagram, and it's kind of like uh, there's no real. Maybe that's what it is. It's kind of like the Wild West. It's really raw. You see people like in their backyard posting photos of like these beautiful handmade knives, but it's like they're working out of like their
Yeah,
garage.
absolutely.
There's a quote that you gave a while back that says an American knife maker's perspective. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is, I guess, and how it differs from maybe some other kind of perspectives or some other cultures of knife making?
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot, and I think a lot of the American knife makers are taking a lot of Japanese styles and European styles and kind of blending it into their own style. And I feel like the American knife makers are kind of redefining how knives are made, especially in the States.
Where does that come from? Is there like a specific region that's really killing it right now, or it's kind of like all over?
As far as the American knife making, yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's all over. It's everywhere from like the backyard and in Ohio to we're making stuff in Oakland, and Chicago's got some great makers. Some people out in New York and Brooklyn. It's kind of spread all over the country. I
Sure.
mean,
Sure.
I think it's really hard to find space, especially in cities. So we're not seeing too much I don't know of anyone that's making knives like in San Francisco, because who can afford to have a industrial space. There's so much that goes into it as far as like the byproduct, like the dust and the noise, that it's kind of hard to find a place to where you can rent a space to be able to make knives.
But is that kind of like counterproductive? Because when I think about the people that are buying the higher end handmade knives, it's either like the enthusiast home cook or the guy who's working on the line at a Michelin restaurant. And those, like, how do you balance that kind of dichotomy of like, you have to be in the big city to be near your quote unquote market, but at the same time you can't afford to have that big
Right.
space?
And I think Instagram has changed a lot of things. Now
Totally.
you can see people's work. It's not really about where they're making it anymore. You're able to see like great photos, and it's the downside is you're not able to like touch the knife and hold it, and that's why
Sure.
we have our stores. We could get rid of this really expensive retail spaces that we have, but we want people to come in and feel the knife and touch it and use it.
Right. That's like something that I've emphasized so much, is that like, there's been people who reach out to me and ask me to review knives, but it's like, it's so individual, right? Like you can't, I feel really hesitant to recommend a knife to someone because like, I don't know, because it might work for me, but you might hate it.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I totally get that
Mm-hmm.
part. So for people that don't know your story, I'm going to kind of include a little bit of that in the intro to the show, but the switch that you went through when you kind of moved from the kitchen to knife making, you were quoted in saying, quote, "I think that it was the knives and the fire that I liked so much about cooking. You throw in some food in a paycheck and I was happy." Can you go a little deeper into that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I started cooking when I was professionally maybe 17 years old, and it seemed fascinating to me. It was really cool. Everything that went into it, I really enjoyed the production of it too. Taking all these raw materials and refining it down and making a dish from it was just really cool. The entire process, and that's kind of like the excitement of having this business now, as we take all these raw materials and turn them into a really refined product in the end.
And there has to be something satisfactory about kind of like knowing that it's going to
Yeah,
last,
absolutely.
right? Because it's something that I got interviewed the other day, and it was like, it was an interesting thing because I said something along the lines of like, well, we're making this thing and then it just disappears after a couple of, it can be even seconds that it's just gone. And then the rebuttal that I got to that, which I thought was really interesting, is that yes, but they come to see you again. And I think that's really interesting, where it's like, I might get to give that experience multiple times, but then I feel so bad because it's like, it's gone. Is that something that drew you to making products as opposed to food?
Yeah, definitely. It's almost scary in the beginning of like making these knives. We want to hope that they last forever and ever.
Right.
And I was a lot more attached to each knife that we made back when we only made 5 or 10 a month, and I'd want to like follow the history of it, and like check in a year. And
Right.
it's cool because people bring it back to us since we offer free sharpening for our own knives. People bring it. We get to see how they use them.
How many knives are you guys doing? You said it was like 5 to 10 a month back in the day. What is it now? What are your numbers?
Last February was our biggest month ever. We did like 110 or so. It was like, my crew's absolutely killing it right now. We're doing a lot of steak knives for restaurants.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because my buddy just had a great meal at Californios and sent me those knives.
Those
Gorgeous.
were really cool.
Where does that start for you guys? Do they reach out to you, or you guys are like out there hustling, saying, "Hey, we want to make knives for you guys"?
They actually started reaching out to us. We had talked about doing this the end of last year, and it took us a while just getting our prototyping this out and like getting the right edge geometry, since it's going against a hard plate all the time. We don't really sharpen it the same way our chef knives are sharpened. A little bit more broader of an angle, and so they could last a little bit better. Having the right weight for it too, and then kind of changing the shape of our handles. A lot of our steak knives are very flat. If you've seen a lot of our classic and pummel classic, there are a lot of curves going on the handle, and we did that with a steak knife, and it just spun on the table. It didn't sit flat, so we had to start making them very flat. And our
Wow.
bolsters are kind of like ground in a way to where they're still comfortable in the hand, but they sit on the table securely.
Where does that fall for you in like, because you're able to, it's taken off now, right? Like you're doing these uh, custom projects for restaurants. You're doing your own line of knives. Has anything shifted for you as far as like what's a passion project and what's paying the bills?
Yeah,
Does that make
absolutely. Yeah.
sense?
It changes all the time. And right now, I think we're going through
Mm-hmm.
some of the biggest changes. And we're re-looking at how we make, like every step of the way, we're rethinking it now so we can try to make things better and faster. There's so much work that goes into it. We used to spend close to 10 hours per knife. And now we're trying to
Wow.
find ways to not sacrifice the quality at all, but still
Right.
make it faster so we can offer them a little bit cheaper. I mean, the first few
Mm-hmm.
knives we did, they were up in like the $400 range, and now we're trying to bring them
Yep.
down, and we're introducing new lines that are more affordable because we want people to buy our stuff. We want them to use it.
Mm-hmm.
We're just trying to like have a more broad spectrum.
You can correct me if I'm wrong here, but Michael Tusk, when you were back at Quince, told you to
Mm-hmm.
open Town Cutler. Is there any truth to that, or can you tell me a little bit more about how
Yeah,
that
that's pretty
transpired?
true. When I was working there, him and I kind of bonded over antique knives. We both had a lot of really old knives. I used some really cool French butcher knife. It was probably 100 years old. The handle on it looks like it was like hand carved.
That's
And I
awesome.
had things like, old antler handle stuff. And he had some cool old shapes. He always went to Italy a couple times a year and would always come back with a bunch of really cool old knives. And I think we just got to talking about it. And he was like, the city needs a shop like this. And that's kind of like how it all began. And I started writing my business plan while I was working there.
Yep.
And then left Quince, which is, it's tough, when you get close with a chef in a restaurant and he wants you to be a part of his team for a long time. But I think had a ton of support for me opening this shop and still does.
How much of that was like scratching your own itch? Were you kind of frustrated with the lack of options in San Francisco back in the day?
I didn't really have too many knives. The knife that I used there
Mm-hmm.
was a Woost off 10-inch that I had for about 10
Yep.
years. Everyone in that
Mm-hmm.
kitchen had the Misonos and Suisins and all the things from like Corinne.
Right. Yep.
And I would,
Exactly. Going to shipping it
yeah, and
from
I
New
would hear
York.
them. They'd get this new knife and they'd use it and they're like, oh, I don't like the feel of this. I'm like, it's too bad you can't feel that knife.
Right. Right. Before you buy
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Do you guys what's the best way to combat that? Like, do you do something like Zappos? Or they like you can try on your shoes, and if you don't like them, you can send it back. Like, do you guys do any? Have you guys had any experience of that where it's like you send someone a knife and they're like, this isn't for me?
I can't recall anyone ever sending a knife back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
We do want to offer like the best service. That's always what we want to do, but we don't
of
want to
course.
have people use a knife for a month and then return it. As we
Mm-hmm.
grow, hopefully one day that we have enough capital and we can be big enough to where that's not going to really hurt us. If someone were to be
Right.
ordering 5 knives and then test them all out and return 4 of them, and then we've got to spend all this time
Totally.
repairing them.
Because there has to be that kind of like you kind of have to be sure when you make a purchase like that
Mm-hmm.
for sure. But at the same time, I'm just trying to think of, like that would be huge if there was some sort of option where you could do that, where you could just try
Yeah.
knives and send it
And if
back.
anyone's unhappy, we've had a couple in the store where they get it and they just don't like the feel of it. Sometimes they'll swap it
Mm-hmm.
out, or we try to do whatever we can to accommodate people.
Is there any custom work that you're doing right now that you're particularly super amped about?
The steak knife project is really exciting. We're trying to do a lot of options.
Uh-huh.
We want our steak knives to be in a ton of restaurants, so we're really trying to push that a lot. We're doing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
boxes for them. We've just got this new laser
Yeah.
cutter and engraver, which is great, and it's helping us like cut these boxes. And we designed it all online, so all we have to do is glue it and nail it together, which is kind of cool because that's
Hell
something
yeah.
that's lacking. We can't just do steak knives without them in a box.
Right.
Like that, they have
Sure.
to go together, and like the wrap doesn't work. This is mainly for like the home cooks. They want that steak knife box kit. So that's exciting. But we're also doing some sayas that we're going to release in the next week or two. So we're going to
Dope.
offer custom sayas that are turnaround and hopefully shorter than a week is what we're shooting for. We're doing
Wow.
all these really cool acrylics, basic woods, but solid woods that are going to be like walnut, maple, so some like really heavy quality sayas. And then behind that, we're also working on some oyster shuckers right now and carving forks. So we're adding some new product that's really exciting. Yeah.
Dope. That's
But the
super
sayas are going to
exciting.
be pretty, hopefully they take off pretty well. We've done the leather scabbards. I think you have one.
Yeah. I have
Yeah.
a couple. That was like back when you were like hand measuring them and
Yeah, I
making
used
them
to
for
stitch each
individual.
one by hand, actually. Yeah.
Dude, that was
Yeah,
that
but
was
now
awesome.
we've had a machine for a few years that does a great job of stitching that. The leather sayas
Yeah.
take, or excuse me, leather scabbards, they take so much time to make. Cutting all that
Right.
leather out and fitting it just right.
Yeah, and you got to
It's a
stitch.
ton of work, and for those, we do multiple steps of hardening the leather after it's done, so it kind of acts like a wooden saya. It's nice and stiff.
Yeah. No, mine are still holding
Yeah.
up great. And I mean, like that was the thing that I remember is that like, uh, you let me keep my
Mm-hmm.
knives when because you did a
Mm-hmm.
drawing of the shape of the blade, and then I got to take which I was not expecting. I was expecting you to like hold
Mm-hmm.
on to the knife through the whole process, but that was awesome that I could still use my knives and then just come back. I don't know, it was like two
Yeah.
weeks or something. Pick up my
Yeah, we
scabbard.
don't
That
want
was
people to be
awesome.
without their knives.
Yeah. Okay. That was another thing that I wanted to say. The service that you guys are providing, and I think that comes from you having that empathy towards chefs, is that you do 1 day
Mm-hmm.
turnaround on Saturdays,
Yeah,
right?
always on Saturdays.
In
Mm-hmm.
all your places. Where did that? Was that kind of again like scratching your own itch, or did somebody suggest that to you, or you were kind of like, it would be really cool for cooks is if we could just give them sharpening in 1 day.
Yeah, I mean, we still try to offer it throughout the week in 1 day. We just
Uh
move
huh.
pretty quick. It's never longer than 24 hours because, again, we don't want people to be
Right.
without their knives, and we only need them for
Mm-hmm.
a few minutes. But it's hard to balance all that. But the Saturdays we saw people are running errands. It's a lot of the home cooks, the nine to
Uh
fives.
huh.
They're out and they want to like drop off in the morning, go to the market, go to the store, and like pick up their knives and cook dinner that night. So the same day
Yeah.
Saturdays is something we think is pretty special.
I think about it from like as a line cook, Saturday's usually your biggest
Mm-hmm.
day. So like to have a super sharp, like freshly sharpened knife on a Saturday is
Mm-hmm.
awesome because that's normally the day of the week when your knife is the
Yeah,
worst, right? Because it's like it's like your last day
yeah,
of your week.
absolutely.
Taking it back again, what was maybe you can tell me a little bit about the mentality you went through when you made that switch from sous chef to knife maker, and you spent some time with master smiths.
Mm-hmm.
Was that your kind of like how you would have done it if you were starting off in the industry again, like your apprenticeship,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote?
Yeah, it was kind of like a slower process. I started off just having the store, just retailing sharpening, making knife bags and scabbards, and it was about 3 years into it that I started to sell knives. And I used to just make one or two a month in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a slow process, and it was something that I was just toying around with after hours, or the one day we were closed, I would try to make a knife or play around with steel. Selling Aaron Wilburn's knives. I started selling his knives when
Yeah,
I
yeah,
opened.
yeah.
Became a master smith a couple years after me opening, and he's totally great guy. He took me in. I used to drive up to Reading to his shop and hammer out some Damascus, or we'd have like hour-long conversations. If I wanted to get into putting bolsters on my knives, he'd walk me through it over the phone or show me next
Mm-hmm.
time I went to his workshop. He was really great at just kind of teaching me those steps.
You have this career in
Right.
cooking, and you're also trying to transition into making knives and
Mm-hmm.
retail. What is there anything that you kind of latched onto where it's like there's this company that you modeled after or a CEO that you're like, I want to do it just like he or she
Mm-hmm.
did it?
Yeah, there's probably hundreds along the way. There's things that you
Yeah.
see of
Mm-hmm.
like an image, like maybe the customer service of a company that you really liked, or like
Mm-hmm.
the website. We're always looking at other companies that have good websites, but
Right.
it's endless. It's constantly finding like other businesses that are working. Like the Headley and
Yep.
Bennett model, they're a great company, and I
Uh-huh.
feel like every year we're doing something new. We're constantly trying to
Right.
adjust and fit with the market, just make it whatever the people want.
In your opinion, is kind of killing it with knives right now.
I like to think that we're killing it, but
Totally.
there's a lot of great people. I mean, Mike Jarvis of Auxiliary, he's doing some really great
Yep.
stuff. I mean, he does mainly like the EDC tactical type of stuff, but
Yeah.
his eye for creation is really cool. His knives
Mm-hmm.
are wicked. I feel like his shapes are outside the box a lot of the times, and
Is there a piece of something that you've seen someone make recently where you're just like, whoa, that's really cool? I saw a pair of like Damascus tweezers on Instagram the other day, and I was like, holy
Yeah, that
shit.
sounds pretty cool. I haven't seen that. I don't really spend a lot of time on Instagram anymore.
Yeah,
It's just like, it's overwhelming. There's a
Oh, is that from Aura? From
no, I'm
Aura?
thinking of Everett. This kid Everett, he I think he's
Uh-huh.
younger, might be like 19 or 20. He came into my shop and I just discovered him on Instagram a couple days before. And he stopped in and wanted to check it out. I think he's from Grass Valley, but he kind of like lives out of his car and travels up and down the coast and surfs and spends a lot of time outdoors. And he built a trailer that he's towing around, and he's got his grinder and a like drill press on this trailer, and he's just like parks on the side of the road or wherever he finds space, and he's making knives outside. It's so cool.
Yeah, that's super. I mean, that's like the supreme Instagram
Yeah,
business,
absolutely.
right? Where you can just be like, now I'm in Nevada, now I'm in Colorado, and now I'm like, I'll just I'll stop at the post office on my way to my next place and ship out this knife.
Yeah, and he's probably picking up wood that he finds on hikes, or
Yep.
the kid's doing it right.
What is a normal? Because you said you spend a lot of your time in that Oakland facility. What does a typical day look like for you now? Because you are now in two locations.
I do a lot of the production still. I've got two
Got it.
main people that are doing knife production full time. So I step in with them. I work on developing new shapes. I'll sit with them and just grind blades all day if we need to, just kind of wherever I need to be. I've got two full-time stitchers that I've been training on doing a lot more of the woodwork for the boxes for steak knives, and they're doing all the sayas. So I've been training with them a lot, and we're developing all those shapes. So I kind of bounce around and just focus on keeping production, keeping the quality up, keeping our speed up, making sure that everyone's like safe and healthy mentally.
Right. Totally. Yeah, that's super
it's
important.
phone calls. I'm on the phone a lot with the San Francisco store or the Chicago store. We use FaceTime a great deal of the times. Like, if Chicago's got some really funky blade and they've got to show me the bevel, we're on FaceTime. I'm trying to figure out and like solve the problem from over here.
I was going to ask you a little bit about that store. I had I spoke with Danny while I was there in Chicago. What do you look for in those people? Because they can't just be knife nerds, right? They also can't just be excellent cooks, right? There has to be kind of like this combination. And I love that everyone that I've interacted with your brand has this kind of empathy for chefs. And how do you kind of screen for that when you're hiring or bringing new people on?
Problem solvers. That's what I look for, is people that can just solve problems, because there's so many things, especially with sharpening, that we get random things all the time, but it's all kind of the same in a sense. I mean, we're taking steel and we're rubbing it on a rock and changing our angles and refining striations. And I look for people that are into that are willing to teach themselves things that might take some extra time and read about different steels and have an understanding of that. Or, of course, they've got to be a knife nerd. And if they worked in a kitchen, that's great, because they have used a lot of knives, and we get a lot of customers that come in and get their knives sharpened, and they're like, I'm going to cone feed duck this weekend, but I've never done it.
So you got to be able to be, wear two hats in that way. That's so funny.
It's interesting.
I have a question from someone who asked me on Twitter. Thomas wants to know, how do you get the patina to form? I think he's asking about the knife that I bought from you guys.
Octagon?
The forced patina?
We dip it in ferric chloric acid. So it's used in a lot of electronics. They'll etch copper with it. And it forces the patina very quickly on that 50 to 100 carbon steel. We dip it into this solution for about maybe 20 or 30 seconds, and it gets really dark.
And that's before the handle's on it, right?
With that one.
Just
correct.
The blank. Yeah. Okay. Another question from Osh. He wants to know, what's up with ceramic knives? And I don't know. Maybe that's I never know how to answer that question, because I've never used a ceramic.
I think
knife.
That's a great question. Just what's up with them? I don't know.
Yeah. I have zero clue.
I've used one, like a little pairing. They seem to be a little bit thicker. We don't sharpen them. I don't know if it makes some people really love ceramic knives, but I don't see.
I'm so scared of like a piece chipping off my food. I feel like that's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
And again, it's like not metal, so like how do you sharpen it or bring it back?
Yeah, it's microscopically. It's got to like chip, I would think, but. I love steel. It's more like alive to me. Even like stainless or carbon, it just feels different. it does a lot of cool things.
This isn't the first time he's asked me about ceramic knives, because I feel like he has a set and he loves them, but I don't really. He does a lot of cooking at home, so I don't know if he's actually like sharpening them week to week to week, right? It's like you buy one set of ceramic knives and the marketing is just so good that you feel like you've bought a indestructible set of knives, but in reality it might be a different story.
And that could be a lot of way with a lot of different knives. The marketing could be so great in it, but the heat treating is awful and they chip. So sadly, there is a percentage of product out there that is really just marketing.
Do you have any kind of horror stories like that where you guys have done marketing in an improper way, or you kind of have people that come in that are kind of like, they don't know how to care for the knife, but they just buy it because it's marketed in a certain way?
Yeah, that happens all the time. I mean, there's a brand that's super well known and marketed really well, and they chip all the time, and we fix the chips in it. I always joke and say fixing the chips in these knives pays our rent. A lot of the customers come in, they spend a lot of money on these knives, and they come in and they think that they've misused it, or they're really bummed about it. It's just the knife. It might be because of the heat treating and maybe poor tempering, or that's probably where it lies, that it would just chip really easily.
There's a lot of line cooks and culinary students, and kind of like, do you have any advice for people that are just starting off in the industry, or who are kind of in an interesting place in their
It's a
career?
tough industry. I wish it were easier. I wish that, cooks can get paid a little more, maybe, have a couple more people in the kitchen. People are running a business, they try to cut labor, and you push these cooks pretty hard. It's an intense environment. I don't know, just keep strong and try to learn as much as you can. Never get in a rut. I think that's where cooks, I think that's what happened to me. I feel like I just got burnt out, and I don't feel like I was learning anymore. I didn't find that I was taking the time to try to learn anything anymore. It was just a job to me, and I lost the passion.
Right. Was that when you became a sous chef?
Yeah, I was a sous chef at a couple different places. But in Quince, I wanted to get to that caliber of a restaurant. That was the nicest place I'd worked in, and as soon as I got there, it was like, I think that I had been burnt out before I even got there. It was really hard. It was actually really sad for me to leave the industry, but I don't miss it.
Do you ever? Yeah, I was gonna say, don't miss the long hours on the line. Do you end up cooking for yourself?
Yeah, I still cook at home quite a bit. Yeah,
that's good.
And I enjoy it a lot more.
That's good.
But I still find that I do big batch cooking a lot. I still like when I cooked. One of my favorite things to do was butcher and make stocks, and I still make a ton of stock and drink stock all the time, just because I love making it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And you mentioned earlier you don't go out to eat that much. Is there any inspiration you get from going out to eat, or it's kind of like you just don't have the time?
Don't have the time. It's pretty expensive. I try to cook at home as much as I can. I do enjoy going out. It just doesn't happen that often. And there's there's a lot of places that I feel might be overhyped. You go to eat these meals, and you spend a ton of money on it, and sometimes I don't really taste the passion in it. Some of my favorite stuff is just the simplest things. And a lot of restaurants seem to have the same dishes, and I don't know if it's from cooks, if it's like this in the Bay Area. I feel cooks move around a lot. They don't really stick at a job that long, so I feel like those techniques and those dishes are bleeding throughout the whole industry. So you're going to have the same beet and goat cheese salad at 7 different restaurants.
Totally.
Yeah.
We've all seen that. Is it different in Chicago from what you've kind of experienced?
Yeah, definitely. The food scene I feel is totally different out there. The protein that I've had out there is unbelievable. Like the Boca group, I've eaten it at Boca and Somerset, and I think they've nailed their protein. It's incredible. The flavor they get out of it is amazing. So that's awesome. Super exciting. But outside that, one of my favorite places in San Francisco is House of Prime Rib. Yeah,
hell yeah,
it's the most consistent place. It's killer in Catonia. Yeah. If I go out, that's all I want to do is go to Catonia and eat pasta.
Spoons. You're really into spoons. Have you ever made your own spoon?
No, I haven't.
Is there any interest in doing
so? Yeah, there is, but I don't think that we can get it down to a price point to where we're selling these vintage spoons, and we go through about 200 a month.
Wow.
And I just don't know that we could ever make it that cheap. People want bundles of spoons.
Yeah.
They want handfuls. And,
Right.
to be able to make all the different shapes and have a mold for so many different shapes, it would just be too expensive for us.
Even at like a higher, like if you're spending $400 on a knife, who's to say you can't have a $75
true,
spoon?
yeah.
That's my thing. I don't know. It's kind of like been something in my head for a really long time to make like a really high quality spoon. Because like I feel like when you compare it like that, it's not really that bad. But when you compare it to like, I mean, your silver spoons are what, 15?
$9.
$9, yeah, super affordable. Like when you make that comparison, it's like $75 for a spoon. That's crazy. But I mean, comparing it to like how the amount of dollars that you've invested in your knives, and I don't know, I had someone comment the other day that the spoon is more used than the knife in certain cases.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
So,
it's a good point.
just, I don't know. Just curious if that's been an idea that you've marinated on, or if you've considered doing anything custom.
Well, we think about making a lot of things, but we're now that as we grow and we're getting rid of retailing so many other brands and trying to focus on our own brands, we're stuck in just making our knives so much now. And so we're trying not to add a lot of new stuff to it too much. We're trying to add like some new lines that are affordable, but still the same process. So we're trying to just focus on knives. Even like our knife bags, we're not really releasing any new products. We're not really investing time into redesigning them because I feel like that market's pretty flooded. I mean, for years, knife bags were like a third of our sales.
Wow.
And now we're seeing that it totally like plateauing out a lot. And I feel like that market, 7 years ago when we opened up, there was nowhere to get knife bags really. And now there's like tons of people that are making them, and they're making them in such good quality. And now these things last so long that all these cooks have 1 or 2 bags already.
Right. And that's not something that you like repeat purchase,
yeah.
right? Like you get, like you said, you get 1 or 2, and it's like maybe you switch between a couple.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so a lot of like this, instead of like eliminating that department and those products, we're trying to cross-train like the stitchers to do other things, and they've been helping us with the knives a little bit too. So that's been a big transition this year, is seeing that our sales in the bags are kind of slowing down a bit, and so we're trying to focus more on keeping stock of our knives. We've never really had like a full stock of every shape and multiple of them. We sell them faster than we can make them, and so a lot of our stuff is custom orders. I'd say more than half of the stuff we make are all custom.
Wow. And that has to do with just people wanting unique things?
Yeah, I think so. I think they like that they say they got this knife made for them, and really all they're doing now is picking out the wood, because we use a lot of buckeye burl, and it has so much variation. They might fall in love with a piece that has like this perfect blonde streak in the middle, and that's the one they want for a handle. Yeah,
totally. I had that experience. Well, not with you. There was a place in Japan where it's just like there's something about the way that the wood was patterned that was just like, I have to have that. You know,
that's pretty cool.
What's your go-to knife that you're using when you cook, like at home? Is there a certain shape or one that you're kind of drawn to?
I like our utility knife a lot. The 6-inch utility. I've got one that was broken. Someone like, I think they sabered a champagne bottle and like has this huge crack in it, so it's all beat up. But I like it. I just kind of use all just beat up old knives.
Are there any kind of big landmarks that you guys are stretching for in 2018, or anything that you're kind of like excited about, or it's just kind of keeping at it?
The biggest thing is stocking our knives up a lot more, and a lot of great brands that we've sold like Zanmai and Takeda. I've been selling those for years, and I love those knives. It seems to get harder to keep in stock, and like sometimes I order from these companies and they don't show up for like 6 months. The margins aren't that great, so I feel that we're kind of being forced into making more of our knives, and that's what we want to do. So that's our goal, is to keep a full stock. By this summer, we should have 4 lines. Our square back is a line that's going to be released soon, because you got our octagon, which was like one of our... Yeah. We released that in December, and as soon as we released it, our 52-100 steel, we couldn't get that steel for months. We still don't have a lot of that steel, so those are now running out of stock.
On hold.
And so we're pushing like our square back, which is going to be our most affordable, at like 100. I think we're 170 for a chef knife.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that one?
Yeah.
Square back? I'm going to pull it up here.
I'm not sure if we have photos on our website yet, but maybe on Instagram.
Is that
it's a light wood.
Is that like the...
It's got a mosaic pin in the middle of our logo. So
Got it.
that's kind of a cool feature, but it's not hand polished. It's just a machine finish. It's very simple to grind.
Right.
It's just square. I think, with our classic and Pummel Classic, it has a lot of these curves, this teardrop shaped bolster, a lot of like ergonomic grip to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're kind of now falling in love with just square, simple stuff. And that's something
Right.
that, as you know, our pallet knives have been out of stock too, because that steel has been
Yep.
hard to come by. So I think you have one of our very first ones when we used to bend that
Yeah,
steel.
it was like way
Yeah,
OG.
now.
Yeah, it was like I don't remember what happened. I like walked in and you had like maybe like three of them
Yeah.
sitting on a shelf, and I was like, "What is
Yeah.
that?" And I was like, "I have to
Yeah,
have it."
we're changing that right now too, and we're gonna try to make that a lot stronger. That tool gets beat up so much. We see these things just get like, hammered. So we're trying to
Yep.
we're gonna make those handles a little bit more square as opposed to the curve that you have, and
Okay.
we're doing two big
Yep.
stainless steel bolts through it. So instead of the straight pins that go through that we peen over, we're going to do the
Yep.
loveless fasteners that we do in a lot of our knives, and a lot more expensive, but it's going to be 10 times stronger of a pallet knife.
Right. The coolest part about that, those pallet knives, at least the first iteration that you guys did, was that like I feel if I'm remembering correctly, it was you guys like hand shaped all of the handles, and because of that reason, none of them were consistent like at all. And you kind of like were just like, well, you just got to kind of feel whichever one feels the best in your hand, and then that's the one that you should grab. And I thought that was so cool.
And unfortunately, we have to get away from that a little bit. In the beginning,
Yeah, absolutely.
Production could be like that, and it was very unique. And even our knives, we were just so new to this that we weren't that good or trained. We didn't have a system. Now we have like measurements and make sure that there's a consistency to the product. That's just changed over time. But yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, just the fact that like I never, because prior to that, the best, I mean, well, it wasn't the best. It was like the only option was like the Ateco palette knife. That's just like, that's got to be such a hard balance for you guys to systemize, but also keep it unique.
Yeah. And that was probably the biggest lesson that we learned was with the pallet knives in the beginning. We used to bend all that steel. I believe back then we were using like 303 or 304 stainless, and it just didn't hold up. A lot of the handles broke. A lot of the pallet knives bent. People were using them to like lift the eye of a French flat top with it. It would totally bend it. Our wood back then was really cheap, and I think that it was really hard to recover from that. A lot of people thought we were making garbage product. We replaced a lot. We turned to some companies to start making the blades for us. They got them a lot thinner. They had these machines that could press them, so we can get this really thin, super, super flexible blade, but really strong. So we went away with making the blades on that. Now we just attach the handles to them. But yeah, that was a tough one in the beginning.
I was gonna say, like, that's almost necessary, right, to have those failures.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
to pave the
way.
One
of the greatest things I heard was fail faster. Let's fail and let's learn from it and let's grow from it. And we try to recover gracefully. With there's always a percentage of failure with every business, and we always try to, like, the most important thing is recovering gracefully. And we don't want to grow too fast either, because that's where we sometimes we slip up and we miss something, and we don't want to ever release a product that's going to fail. So we've slowed down a lot on that, and we test a lot of our product for a good long time.
Are there any kind of like dream partner? Because I know you said you guys are trying to move a little bit away from carrying other people's knives, but is there any other partnerships that you're kind of pursuing as far as like getting other brands into the retail locations?
Not at the moment. I mean, I do like supporting local makers, so other knife makers will always sell. And we try to get some things from like the California area that we'll sell in the San Francisco store, or in Chicago we try to sell like Chicago area makers. But a lot of that's like, it's not consistent as far as like keeping it in stock.
Yeah.
It's like if they, Mike, brings us like 10 knives, at a time, and sometimes we get down to only having 2 in stock, or, it's kind of all over. People will come in and want to see this huge selection of auxiliary that we had a month or 2 ago, but it might be a little bit lower at that moment because he's busy doing other things and he's still selling knives on his own.
I would assume that the home cook market is much larger than the line cook market. Do you ever struggle with that, to kind of like market to one versus the other? or kind of like design your products for one
Yeah,
versus
that's
the other?
been one of the biggest things we've talked about in this year. We've always had the mentality of like targeting to the professionals, and the home cooks will follow.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
now we're
Right.
finding that we're starting to target more to the home cooks. It's a larger market. The
Mm-hmm.
professionals will always be there. We hope that we have their support. We love to sell to them because they beat the hell out of their tools, and that's what we want to see.
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it's been interesting to kind of make that transition to seeing a lot more home cooks, and it kind of blew my mind to see how many home cooks are coming in and dropping money on like really great knives.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
real though. Looking around when I was in Corinne and in New York City, and it's like there's probably like 2 chefs in here, and the shop is like full. And then you really realize like, oh man, people are really, and I don't know, you probably know this better than anyone, how many home cooks there are that are actually willing to spend, I mean, $250, $300 on a knife.
I don't think I ever really stopped to look at it and like take notes of how it's changed. And we saw that all of 2017 was like, wow, we sell a lot to home cooks, way more than the professionals, because unfortunately they don't get paid a whole lot, especially as rent's going up in the Bay Area constantly.
Yep.
You know, I hate when cooks come in and they try to buy a really expensive knife and they have to check their bank account. It's like, let's hold off. You know, maybe we can do like a layaway thing, or maybe you don't need this knife.
Sure.
But the tech business is big, and you get these households that are 6-figure incomes, and they're willing to buy a whole new set of knives. You know, they get into cooking, they buy good pans. And I feel like it's very similar to stereo equipment, though, too. On our level, is you know, it's probably not totally necessary to buy a $200 or $380 knife, but it does make a difference a little bit. But you know, the $200 knife might be just as good for like just hacking up some vegetables.
Right. And I would assume that like if you're cooking at home, one of your knives would last, like the edge at least would last, especially if you buy it from you. You can just like, the fact that you can just bring that knife back into your store and you'll sharpen it for them. I mean, that would sell it to me if I was just a home
absolutely.
cook.
I feel like that is a good selling point. And for a long time, I think we got kind of bummed that we didn't see a lot of our knives coming back in. You know, last year was a big year for our knives. The year before, 2016, we did like 250 knives, and that was a huge leap to the year before. And so last year, we didn't see a lot of knives come back in. We're not really seeing a lot of our stuff come in for sharpening. Every once in a while we do, and they're still sharp. That's the cool thing. Is like we've seen knives that are a year or two old. There's carbon steel, has a ton of patina, so you know they're using it like crazy, and they're still shaving hairs on the arm. So we thought that people were just, you know, I was afraid that people weren't coming back because maybe they were unhappy, but I think that these knives are just staying sharper than we had imagined they would.
That's exactly what you want.
One thing that we have that I think is different than a lot of other knife makers is I started off just sharpening. You know, I've sharpened about 40,000 knives.
Wow.
We know edge geometries super well. We know how to sharpen. That's what we do. And we started making knives a few years back, and so our knives are totally sharp. You know, some knife makers don't have that sort of advantage that they've had thousands of knives they've sharpened. They probably only sharpened the knives they've made.
Yeah. What is one or maybe a piece of advice that you see given out that is like completely false? They're just like, no, that's not true.
We hear all sorts of things with knives. Like, do knives get dull if you don't use them, if they just sit in a drawer?
I've never heard that one.
Yeah, we've heard some crazy things. What else? Like magnetic strips. People think that it like bends the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like the wooden blocks, you know, that dulls the knife.
All totally.
It depends. You know, if you're really rough with it, I mean, you're pushing that edge against a hard wood for a cutting board straight into it. It just gliding across into a wood block is probably not the worst thing. If anything, it's probably cleaning that edge up a little bit. When you run an edge on a piece of wood to like take that burr off, it might clean it a bit. But the worst thing about those blocks is probably the bacteria that we see. If people bring in a block, if you look inside there with a flashlight, you'll probably never use that again.
Oh my God. Yeah, totally. So your preferred method is the magnetic strip?
I like the magnetic strip right against the wall. It doesn't, being in the Bay Area, we don't have counter space out here. So those are great. We used to make those for a long time, but it was so expensive to use these rare earth magnets that we don't do that anymore. But I like to just leave mine out on a cutting board. I only have one or two I use. I have a towel that's rolled up, and I put my knife on its side, kind of on that towel, so the edge is off the board, doesn't slide anywhere.
Yep.
I like my knives out. I want to see them.
Have you heard of this guy? He's out of Sweden.
I know what you're talking about.
I think it's Sweden.
Yes.
Piotr the Bear.
His stuff is
Piotr
great.
the Bear. His stuff is awesome.
We've actually been in some email conversations talking about getting his product. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, the product I'm talking about is the leather magnetic thing that goes on the wall. I just think that's awesome.
And he's got these pucks now, someone showed me.
Yes, displays it, gets it out of the drawer so you can actually see it, but also is like intelligent storage, not just, putting it out on display.
And it's out, it's dry too. That's what you want it to dry and breathe. Yeah. We also have these countertop blocks that are called 360 blocks.
Yeah, I was standing
they're pretty cool.
When I went to visit super awesome. Who makes those?
It's a couple that's here in San Francisco, and they worked on it for years, and they were bringing prototypes to me. They had the idea, and then they saw my strips, so I knew how thin the wood would have to be and what type of magnets. So I kind of helped with them a little bit. They used my knives and kind of tested out and got the weight just right so they didn't tip over when you pull the knife off. It was a ton of prototyping for them, and they make a great product. Where
can people find you? Where do you want people to come say hi to you?
Online. I'm in hiding. I'm always hiding in the warehouse. You could email from the website. Always. I answer all those emails. That goes directly to me. So any questions, people email all the time about a knife that they're looking to purchase or have questions about anything knife related, hopefully.
Thank you for making it this far in the show. I really appreciate your ears. I really enjoyed finally being able to interview Galen. Hopefully you learned a thing or two, got a little bit of insight maybe into him and his process, or a little bit more about Town Cutler if you haven't heard of them or their stuff before. You can hopefully see why I'm so supportive. Again, if you want to follow Galen, he has opened the floodgates to his email. That is linked up down below. Plus, I'm going to obviously link up all of their social stuff in the show notes. Galen tells me he's not that great at technology, but you know how to use Google. You can find it. If you have someone that you want me to interview for the show, hit me up. Let me know. I am making 2018 the year of the interviews for me and this podcast. So the sky is the limit. I really hope that you guys can find someone that you're interested in, that you want to hear more about, that you want me to interview, and you can submit your questions. I can get access to them, and then we can actually do a little sit-down interview with someone who is also a veteran of the industry. So regardless, keep crushing it. My name's Justin Khanna. Have a good one.